So it's 10:30 on a Friday morning, and we are sitting down to record this week's emergency podcast. You think maybe we should have done this sooner this week?
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hell yeah, shut up, hell yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you all, and welcome to another week of Emergency Podcast. It really is kind of emergency filled this week. A lot has gone on. It's been a fire hose of news. Certainly not boring. I'm here with Moisés Chiullán, my partner in crime. How you doing?
Good, man. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, some might say that with a name like Emergency Podcast, we should have recorded earlier this week. But if we had
Some have said
recorded
this.
earlier this week, we would have missed one thing and another thing and another thing and another thing and yet another thing that happened throughout the week. So we would find ourselves recording 6 podcasts. And do people want 6 podcasts or one? That's the choice. Let us know. Don't let us know on social media. Your choice.
Steph over from Swoon Tower, she had just wanted a series of 90-second voice memos from me being excited about various news bits. And maybe that is something that, well, she wanted that to be the whole podcast, actually. She didn't really want the hour of banter that we have. She just wanted 90-second bursts of knowledge and reaction, I guess. So something we're thinking about. We're
Yeah.
definitely putting that on the list of possible avenues to go down. But for the meantime, we're doing this, right?
Yeah, that's the thing is maybe those mini episodes would be a thing that people would listen to and they would skip the longer things. And giving people those options, that's yet another emergency that we have to contend with.
They would miss the meditations on armadillos like we did last week.
Yeah.
None of those this week.
The really good juicy
No.
stuff.
Oh, so good. Anyway, let's go ahead. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about. So let's start with one of the bigger pieces of news. We got this, I believe, starting Monday, and then it kind of developed through the week. We had learned kind of out of the blue, but maybe not out of the blue. We had suspicions about Emiliano Rigoni and kind of his future with the club, but we thought it might be something that would reconcile more as kind of an end of the year thing, as with, say, Max Rudy last year when just his option was declined. But we learned, of course, on Monday that he was going on waivers. And then shortly after that, I guess the waiver period ended pretty quickly. We're still not exactly clear about the MLS mechanisms on that one. But indeed, Rigoni was bought out of his contract. He is now a free agent. He is now, of course, departed from Austin FC. And the team is less one winger slash emergency striker into a stretch where they have to play 3 games in 8 days and only have 16 healthy field players, as Josh Wolf told us yesterday. So certainly some immediate issues for Austin FC, but throughout the week, kind of shortly after the initial news on Monday, and then we got that clarified by Rodolfo Borrell yesterday, that there was a kind of amazing clause within Rigoni's contract that said that if he made 12 appearances during the 2024 season, his contract would be auto-renewed for 2025. That option year would be picked up. Normally, MLS contracts are club option exclusively. Players generally don't get options unless there's something folded into the contract like this, something that also maybe kept Alex Ring in Verde this year. We learned of some kind of performance trigger, which might have just been an appearance trigger at the end of 23 when that contract was reviewed. And he, of course, did not join the exodus of players in 23 and has remained for 24. So that's certainly kind of a big piece of news. One of the designated players that Austin FC had, a player that they were really banking on to come in and be sort of a Robin to Sebastian Driussi's Batman in 2022, is now out. So, Moises, your initial thoughts, first of all, when this news came down, and then just as we progressed through the week and learned more and more about what really went down.
Well, starting with him getting put on waivers, those waivers got wavered themselves rather quickly. It seems there were only 6 teams, by many people's estimation, that actually could have picked him up based on his performance. Who would was the question that was going around a lot. I think this is a case of an agent doing right by his commission and wrong by his client. Um,
Mhm.
because as dumb of a clause as that was for the sporting director at the time to put in. And people have alternately thrown around conspiracy theories of, oh, well, Claudio Reyna didn't really have that much to do with it, and it was all Wolf going rogue, and him and Precourt making a deal that they shouldn't have made, and not even Claudio Reyna was this dumb. But I mean, look at Alex Ring's deal that it seems had some sort of similar kinds of triggers into it. That's the easy evidence that I would use to refute that whole notion of this didn't have much to do with Claudio Reyna. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if there is a contingent of Claudio Reyna defenders out there, but good luck with that, guys. If you exist, for me, Rigoni had to go at some point, and he's the sweetest guy in the world, nicest guy in the world, wonderful to converse with. But as Sao Paulo fans tried to tell us as they sent highlight reel after highlight reel of him totally boning absolute sitters, easy shots, breakaways that he should have done something with. For some reason, he just hits performance anxiety. And when it comes time to take advantage of some of the easiest opportunities for what should be a top tier player, he just, as I said, has that kind of performance anxiety thing that looks like it kicks in, where
Right.
we've seen a certain amount of that, but apparently that's really just been the way that he was at Sao Paulo, the way he was at Zenit, the way he was at other clubs. And people tried to tell us, and we found out relatively quickly on the Austin side of things. But because he joined the team during that glorious 2022 season, there was only so much that he could show himself to be the player that we have found him to be over the last year and a half or so. I think the biggest thing not really actively being discussed much. Yeah, hilariously bad deal. Yeah, that agent and he, boy, are they dining out, and he's getting paid a gigantic amount of money to do nothing. This may end his career, because where does he go? Who picks up this player on the other side of this? Burrell told us that a couple of different options had come up for how to deal with this, indicating that there were two teams and that they were deals that could have happened. And I guess whether Rigoni's agent actually consulted him or not is the other thing. I don't know. I don't know that he necessarily did. For an agent to make a deal like this says, well, wait a minute. He's going to play all the time, 12 appearances. Awesome. This is the easiest money that I have in my
Mhm.
portfolio. Excellent. Even if they cut him, I'm going to make my money. And if Burrell, taking him at his word, which I have no reason not to, honestly, talked to this agent and said, here are a couple of ways to get him onto another team, then maybe he's good just cashing out with what he made off of this deal overall and just doesn't want to play soccer anymore.
Yeah, because
Maybe
there's
that's the
still a
case.
buyout for this year. There is still another like million plus that came in.
Yeah. Like, that goes a long way in Argentina. But I just the incalculably stupid part of this that I don't get is how this agent thought that he was going to continue making money off of Rigoni as any kind of a cash cow, or if he was just good getting his piece off of this deal that just got bought out, and is happy to just let the player be done playing soccer.
Yeah, I mean, unless they thought that maybe Austin wouldn't notice and that 12 appearance clause would just kind of come and go and like, oh, stuck for another year, right? So, I mean, again, yeah, like you look for and Burrell got into this a little bit that he was pretty aghast that it was an appearance based sort of clause solely rather than, if anything, a performance based clause. Because again, you're looking for your designated players to play all the time, as Burrell had talked about, but also to perform, right? I mean, 6 goals, 6 assists, and 58 appearances. I mean, that just doesn't really cut it for a designated player in MLS. Doesn't really cut it for a designated player in MLS. You're looking for probably about 3 to 4 times that production, I would say. And again, yeah, when he came into Sao Paulo, yeah, you make a really good point. There was already this kind of sense that Rigoni was sort of going to Austin to rehab his career, that he didn't maybe quite have his head straight in Sao Paulo, that it was a difficult situation for him. And Austin did this too, I think, with Cecilio Dominguez to a certain degree, this kind of operating procedure of baby, I can fix you. And I don't think that that necessarily works. I mean, sometimes, yeah, I mean, if you can get a player on a deal and it's kind of a low risk, high reward kind of situation, but obviously obviously very different situations, both of those, but ultimately kind of the end result is that you have this mid-season buyout that happens. And in Dominguez's case, it was this mutual termination. With Rigoni, obviously this buyout, and there is that mechanism in MLS that allows you to do that once during the season, possibly twice. We think that there has been a rule change that allows for a second buyout. We haven't gotten that confirmed yet, but based on the meetings that MLS had a couple of months ago, we do think that that is something that is there. And if that is the case, then there is one more buyout possible for Austin. Not that they would necessarily need to activate that this season, but again, yeah, we didn't even get to like the Musa Gite situation, right? And what happens if they can't find a new team for him in about a month here. And then all of a sudden you've got Gite coming back.
Yeah, that was among the many, many things that happened in that press conference, which overall I think extended to the longest overall chunk of media availability the club has done previously. I think that record was set because of a long gap between a first press conference and the end of practice and talking to Josh and then talking to a player. But this one was just it was all content the whole time. And I'm frankly not that surprised that we didn't get around to asking any questions about Musa Gite because there was so much else to talk about. But I guess to put a button on the Rigoni situation, nicest guy in the world, but was definitely a boat anchor on the leg of this roster and needed to get cast off. Sadly for him, not so sadly for the fan base and people who watch the club, especially considering the options that it now opens up, which is literally any number of different possible options for filling that international slot, for filling that senior roster slot, for taking advantage of that DP designation.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that in a second because there are two kind of enticing options. I mean, I think one more enticing than the other, and I think one more realistic. I think the other one might be kind of a case of transfer rumor Mad Libs that happen sometimes around the windows. But we do want to get into this a little bit because, I mean, obviously there were, and this took up a lot of the press conference. And again, yeah, it was like an hour with Roto, and then we had Josh Wolf for kind of an unusually long time. And then we also talked to Brad Stuver. And by the time we got to Stuver, I said, we're almost all questioned out. But then we managed to talk to him for another like 12, 13 minutes. It doesn't sound like a lot, but in press conference time, that's fairly hefty. So yeah, so obviously one of the big questions around Rigoni, and this had to do with Jorge Iturralde and something that he had put online, this kind of question of how the news actually got broke to Rigoni. So according to Jorge's account, it happened in the locker room after the Saturday night match against SKC. That didn't seem entirely credible. Roto's version of it was that he contacted the agent who, obviously, according to his account, he had been in contact with before. They were aware of the contract situation and contacted him on Sunday morning after the game and said that we are going to put him on waivers. And do you want to tell him or do you want me to tell him? The agent chose to tell the player. We did learn from Stuver a little bit later on that Rigoni did get back with his boys kind of one more time after all the business was official, and they're all leaving on good terms and things like that. So that's reassuring. But I think it took up a lot of the oxygen just because, on one hand, there was this trying to figure out, okay, is this account true, or is there kind of a different, perhaps more credible story? Because the way that Jorge described it going down didn't seem entirely credible or within character of the club. And then also, I think just kind of questions about how Austin FC is kind of conducting its business and dealing with its players from some members of the fan base, given how the Diego Fagundes trade went down last year. Certainly there are people in the camp that was not necessarily the best move for the club to make. If you look at it from a business standpoint, if you look now and you see that Diego's 2024 number has jumped from 1 billion to 1.31 million, and you see what the Galaxy has done in the offseason to essentially make him a super sub. That's a pretty expensive super sub. So again, you can kind of question the club. That's certainly within your purview to do so. But I think a lot of this press conference, a lot of the agenda going in was to allow Roto to kind of set the record straight on behalf of the club. So Moises, since you are bilingual and since a lot of the kind of more interesting exchanges happened in Spanish, would love to get your take on things. I mean, to clarify, if you have not seen the two-part press conference, as Austin FC has put it up, I have links in my story yesterday on Verde All Day, so you can go there and you can see it. And if you are at all nerdy about soccer, it is really compelling TV, and it's probably worth an hour of your time. But Roto did, kind of provide the essence of basically saying that no, this did not happen this way, and gave the account and questioned the credibility of whatever sources Jorge might have culled to bring this story to us. So, Moises, what can you clarify?
There are a number of aspects to this, and I think on the one hand, I'm not going to just directly call Jorge a liar, because that seems to be what he was trying to get Roto to say directly, was that he was calling Jorge a liar, and Roto kept reiterating over and over, I'm just saying that the source you have is lying to you, that is not correct information that you've been given. And it felt like Jorge was very much going for, okay, call me a liar, call me a liar. That goes into the narrative that Jorge has been trying to sell for whatever reason. I think there's a great deal of showmanship to what he does. He and I get along, I think, collegially. I've called him a vampire in Spanish. I've called him various names teasingly, humorously, but I don't have the kind of track record experience with this guy that a lot of people do. And that isn't to say that there aren't issues that I take with some of his stances on stuff. In this case, it felt very directly like he came into this with the agenda of furthering the narrative of, oh, this club treats its players so horribly poorly. Look at what they did to poor Diego Fagundes, who they sent off to LA Galaxy with his giant bag of money intact. The aspects that people who have kind of taken this narrative as the narrative have set aside, and I'm not saying that I have a personal stake either way in this, is it was kind of known that Diego and his family could be the source of various direct leaks of locker room based information. And as I think everybody pretty much knows about Austin FC, they don't like that kind of thing. They don't like info leaking out. And when Diego left, suddenly a bunch of regular leaks of information about players departing, all that kind of stuff, completely dried up. And a narrative developed that this was somehow the worst thing that could possibly happen, because certain people had access to certain other people that had information that were no longer around. And the people who had access to that info that they weren't supposed to have, and that they were being given in direct contradiction to non-disclosure agreements that are included in all these contracts attached to giant bags of money. This is something that the fan base wants to know, the inside dirt. They want to know how the sausage is made. But in this case, the information about said sausage getting made wasn't necessarily, I mean, it was the incredibly skewed and biased perspective of a player in the case of Diego. And I think the world of him and his family personally, and like them very, very much. But let's take it down to brass tacks. That's what a various people who are still hanging on to that being a problem for the fan base, that the kinds of info that they got because of that access, that disappearing, was a problem. So extending that narrative to, oh no, and now poor Emi Rigoni crying on his bag of money with his diamond shoes that are too tight, getting away with his bag. I'm not going to blame him for having a terrible agent, but he's the one with the terrible agent that put him in this particular situation. So the furtherance of the narrative of Austin FC is uncaring of its players, unappreciative of its players. Things brought up where, why didn't the club immediately post a thank you, Emi Rigoni, on social media? At a certain point, in a case like this, perhaps that would come off as disingenuous. So
Right.
if it
Yeah,
is, why
exactly.
didn't,
Thank
why,
you.
yeah, like,
Thank you
why,
for the 6 goals and 6 assists in
right.
58 games.
Like, why didn't you post something praising him to high heaven for his honestly not great performance by literally anyone's measure? Um, if the club had posted something that was effusively praising of the wonderful and great Emmy Rigoni, a player beyond compare, whatever, then I feel like those same people, Jorge included, would immediately cry foul as to the disingenuousness of it. That's
Mhm.
that's my
Right.
read of it.
Right.
So there,
Plus that tweet becomes a poo posting magnet for anybody who
mhm,
wants to come in and
mhm.
poo post.
Right,
2 cents of myself here.
and like overall, it seems that there is a lot of theater built around this. So these are things that I think various people are cognizant of. That is not news to people, but it bears mentioning because we are in this disinformation age where people just keep stating certain things as fact, and unless they're challenged, they decide that them being unchallenged about it makes it fact. So, to my favorite vampire in the press corps, continuing to say something over and over like this doesn't make it fact, dude. And and like this guy got paid out on his deal. He in no way did he get screwed out of money that he was contractually guaranteed. If his agent did not consult him about the two potential deals that came through, then boy, that is on that agent. The thing that Jorge started saying earlier in the press conference, because Jorge didn't actually tag in until about 20 minutes in. The kind of muttered defense of, oh, no, I have all the facts. They'll be on my show Monday. Don't miss my show. Don't miss my show. um Roto, I'm sure, is viewer number one every time it's posted, by the way. He was saying that Rigoni has been working on a move for a couple of weeks, and if Rigoni, as we know now, was definitely well apprised of the 12 appearance trigger in his contract, then
The contract he
yeah,
signed,
that he
that he
signed.
presumably looked at before he signed it.
Here's the thing: is I- I'm not going to assume every footballer reads every line of every contract they sign, but something like a 12 appearance clause triggering an option is something that I bet, even as unscrupulous of an agent as this seems to be, that's the kind of thing that this guy would have gone over with the player was, look at this amazing deal I got you. These idiots
Right. Right.
signed
Yeah.
this 12 appearance trigger. These morons are going to pay you as long as you show up for 12 games, even as a sub,
And stay healthy. Yeah.
and stay healthy. And look, as a player, to me, initially, that would be like, whoa, crap. Okay. All right. Awesome. This sounds like a great deal. I'm definitely getting my option. I'm definitely getting this, definitely getting that. But the longevity problem with that is that, like I said earlier, it does not create a pathway if the player is not performing and the team really wants to cut them. I as a slight betting man without money or odds involved, I bet this agent did not actually apprise Rigoni of those trade options and just decided that they were not workable. And that's the thing, is that the agent is the barrier between the player and the club. And would Burrell break with proper procedure and sidebar the player and talk to him about this? I don't know that he necessarily would, because that kind of thing, I believe, goes against the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying
And
to
I think Burrell is very conscious of those kind of guardrails.
and
And that's kind of the indication that he
mhm.
gave. I mean, the other thing too is with the agent, I mean, he has that information. I mean, what's to stop him now from going to those teams that Burrell informed him of and trying to make those deals himself?
I mean, probably not much, but I bet there is less interest and incentive from those clubs looking at him as a distressed asset rather than a
True.
trade asset. That, like,
Mhm.
to me, that's where he screwed up the biggest,
Right.
is that
Right.
it's not just, well, let's just wait out the clock. I mean, what did it benefit, rather than taking the deal that theoretically would have preserved the bag for the rest of the season? The the way that Burrell talked about the various surprises left for him, and this being one of the most unpleasant when it came to
And one of the
looking at
ones,
contracts.
yeah. And we also don't know, again, because Rigoni had a second option year for 26 and his
Hmm.
contract is, if I'm remembering this right. So what's to say that there's not a similar option in that contract?
So it could be that they were holding out hope that being short rostered, that the team was going to actually put him in for 12 appearances.
Mhm.
That was the gamble, that was the calculus, and that then they would continue. I don't know what hypothetical idiocy this agent had in his head. Like the more that I think about it, the less sense I can make out of it from a deal making perspective.
Unless they
Um,
saw it happening with Ring last year.
yeah, I mean,
Because there's kind of the idea, we don't know this for sure, but the idea that maybe he was going to be on reduced appearances to possibly not trigger an option year, and then the team was just stuck, and then also recognize that Ring did still have a lot of value, kind of more
he
so
does.
Ring maybe being less replaceable and more versatile than Rigoni ended up being.
And I mean, the rumors had it that there was some sort of a very, very visible falling out of sorts between Ring and Wolf that was
Mhm,
an off-field issue, quote unquote, which is what happens when a player
mhm,
screams at a coach, allegedly. That is what led to him losing the armband. And if you ask me, Ring's performance last year is a total 180 from Rigoni not really doing much of anything to prove himself other than okay, a goal that won the game in Houston.
mhm.
That's great, but when that is the extreme outlier in terms of player performance, it's very different than Ring putting in shift after shift after shift at center back and not complaining about it and leading from the back and doing the job and proving his usefulness. We saw various things last year that had everybody, myself included, convinced that Ring was gone, that he was getting rid of his vehicle and getting rid of their house and picking up a short-term lease and various other things that filtered through the rumor mill. He was similarly preparing to be gone in the way that Rigoni has allegedly been, making steps to move over the last couple of weeks. Where if he really had a good handle on what that contract meant and what kind of a situation his agent put him in, he should have been looking for weeks and weeks, not just a couple weeks before now.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
but to characterize the general nature of the back and forth between Burrell and Jorge, um, there was a story that Jorge was showing up to help tell and continue to sell, and Burrell was not having any of it, and told him in no uncertain terms. And look, I am not calling Jorge a liar, but some of the things that he was asserting as fact just did not stand up to basic scrutiny. And it's not because Rodolfo Burrell is some incredible world class actor who was selling a thing of his own and was making up stories or something. But when you have a world class sporting director who came from winning the treble to one of the top valued clubs, not just in MLS, but the world, who is telling you, I can literally prove to you everything that I am saying. What can you prove? And that's not saying divulge your sources. That's saying, okay, prove what you're saying, make it work for me logically. And the person saying this cannot work it out. And maybe Jorge had a source who told him a thing. Where's his second source?
Mhm.
If we're talking journalistically, tell me about the second sourcing on this, and I will take
Mhm.
the investigative journalism angle. I'm sorry, but it like it, I I owe Rodolfo Burrell and the club absolutely zero like loyalty or fealty, but Jorge did not sell this to me. And I wanna believe people when they say that they have some sort of an inside source that told them this or that. God knows the world of sports is not the touchy-feeliest, nicest world to live in, and horrible, mean things get done to people all the time. But Burrell shut him down, and then Jorge tried to bring it back up again, and he got shut down again. and again and again and again. And he wasn't shut up. It was just, okay, this is the exact sequence of events that happened. And there was nothing that was, to me, effectively done to properly refute any of it. And so now we have between now and Monday to see how Jorge builds his counter narrative to how this was all a fiction, because he did the same thing with Fagundes. And
Mhm.
even in the case of Fagundes, I've talked to people in a position to know, and the people in a position to know story did not actually contradict anything that Rodolfo Borrell said about how that went. And knowing what you and I both know about the power and potency of Tom Boggart scoops, when Tom Boggart gets a scoop, the annoyance that I saw on the face of Borrell in that initial press conference about the info getting leaked said to me, oh, Rodolfo Borrell joined an MLS club not understanding the pretty much understood relationship between Tom Boggart and an unimpeachable source inside the MLS front office that leaked to him deals that are being finalized, because everything has to actually get approved by the league, because all the, I assume people listening to this might know this, but for those who don't, when a club wants to do a deal for a player, all of that has to get approved through the league. When Jesus Ferreira wanted to take a giant bag of money to go play in Russia, the league had to approve that, and the league went, actually, they're trade sanctions, so you can't do that.
The league owns the contracts.
The league owns the contracts, the MLS central government, long live the revolution, la da 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 da. And now that Burrell well knows that that kind of stuff is going to leak once it gets to a certain point of a deal, I think he was better prepared to expect it, and the club's better prepared to expect it for this one. But I have not seen a version of events that Burrell laid out, which he reiterated about the Fagundes trade, that actually conflicts with what the people saying, well, these are all lies and this is terrible. And yes, my heart went out to the Fagundes family, and he has a very young baby, and he had kids who were off on vacation when he found out and everything. And two things can be true. It can be horrible and heartbreaking for the fan base, for a player's family, and that sort of thing. And people are fond of saying, well, that's football. I'm not as fond of it because, I'm a touchy-feely nerd about things, and I care about people's feelings a bit. I'm not super sports heartless like a real sports journalist, as I'm often reminded of. But this to me is a case of watch the video, even if you don't speak Spanish. The body language, the vocal inflection tells a lot of the story. There are various translations, flowing around about different interchanges. Frankly, I appreciate seeing journalists being held to account as strongly as Burrell did Jorge in this case, because we should be held to a standard of expecting proper sourcing, proper journalistic ethics being followed with different things. And I'm not saying that Jorge did anything unethical, but we have to be held up to scrutiny, or what we're putting out there is just, it's just sensationalist, tabloid stuff for the sake of clicks. And again, I'm not accusing Jorge of any of that, but I'm saying that he does have to stand up to that scrutiny. And all of us who have been in that room dealing with Burrell are similarly challenged to, if we're going to say, well, I have a source that says this and this, I mean, expect that you're going to get pushback, and your pushback to the pushback can't be, well, just wait for my show Mondays at 7. That to me doesn't do anything to convince me that I have you wrong, or that you're being railroaded or something like that. Yeah, I feel like I've probably gone on at length,
You have, but this is
because
good.
there's only like there's a small pocket of people who are just like, oh, Jorge's the only real journalist among you, and to those people I say, well, you're not even listening, so what's the point?
Yeah. So Monday at 8, by the way, for Jorge
Monday at
show,
8.
which I probably will not tune in actually. So just I get busy. I have a class that I'm going to start teaching that I have to get ready for. So I'm sure
I'll,
there
I'll
will be missives that
I'll
will.
catch the clips on Twitter or something.
Okay. Yeah, please do. Yeah, so I wanted to circle back to a couple things you had said, and this will kind of helpfully maybe transition us into kind of another thing and another Burrell face of annoyance that I caused. So, and we'll get into that story briefly. But yeah, so on the Bogert stuff for a second. Yeah, I mean Tom Bogert is a great journalist, great guy. I really like him as a person and as a journalist. You know, he does cultivate a lot of sources himself, so he does get some things from clubs along the way, just kind of depending on the relationships that he's cultivated, and also kind of maybe more importantly, the kind of willingness that clubs have in terms of dealing with media and being more loosey-goosey with information versus being very protective. And I've been like, obviously I've done work with the league. So even as a league official writer, knowing those kind of barriers and understanding how the clubs operate very, very differently from one another. So yeah, the working theory is that there is kind of an MLS sanction process where Bogert gets information. And again, this is just a working theory. We don't know this for sure. I mean, when Bogert is reporting that deals are close to being finalized, he's pretty spot on. And just kind of based on how inconsistent clubs are amongst themselves in terms of what information they get out, and that the contracts do originate with the league, it seems you could deduce from that, and a lot of people have deducted from that, that's kind of the process. That's what's going on. That's not to discredit the work that Bogert does at all, because I think he's fantastic. But I think also there's a kind of chain of information release that happens in order to get news out to fans as they're anticipating and getting excited about transfers, because obviously that's something that fans very much key in on, as we're finding this week with the series of emergencies that we have. So, and that said, Austin tends to be a very sort of closed off club in terms of information. Like with Wolf, for example, we were joking about at the start of that press conference about, Roto saying a lot and Josh saying, oh, great, I don't have to say anything then. It's like, yeah, we know. Like that's what you would, sometimes he will give us stuff. And again, like for people who are like, oh, you should be just hard and come in there fiery. It's like, you're not going to get any information if you do that. We're cultivating these relationships. This is based on trust. There are certain times where we've cultivated enough trust and have enough of a track record of being fair and being resolute in terms of the information that we give and the way that we process this and the way that we tell the stories, that we will get something, that we will get pieces of information that are, maybe strategic to let out, but also, are helping us to tell the story. And, this is about obviously ultimately keeping fans engaged. That is something that they want to do, but the club likes to do it very specifically on their sorts of terms. Like we did get something with Burrell towards the end, which I think this was from your question about the fan letter that he had sent out. And basically it was something that he had just kind of said something offhand to Cam Kubik, who's the communications lead, and Cam and him were talking, and then he produced this letter, and he was worried, oh, two days after the game, are people really going to care about this? Like, come on, Roto.
Yeah.
Like, fans are going to hold on to wins for a while, especially wins like that. It was a great moment. Like nobody's forgetting that. Like,
yeah. And in him explaining that process, the thing I found interesting was, he said, look, English is my second language and things get lost in translation. And my interpretation of his explanation of the timeline of it, because I don't think he was doing this to counter the conspiracy theories that both of us saw about people saying, oh, they're putting this out there because they're about to renew Wolf, or season ticket renewals are coming up. And they said, Roto, quick, juice the fans. He apparently said something to Cam that I think got interpreted as, I would like to make a statement to the fans that that he was told, maybe that's not the best idea. I didn't quite understand what he meant. And then he produces this written thing a couple days later, and they go, oh, this is great. People are going to love this. Yeah. Why? Oh, no. We didn't know that. No. Okay. Yeah. We should definitely send this out. And his reaction to that was, well, it's been 2 days and there's getting a game tomorrow. Do you think people are going to care? And they were like, oh, people will very much like this. Yes. We need to run this right now.
Yeah, getting to know the fan base a little bit more. Yeah, Roto also didn't know that the "Let Roto Cook" meme existed, because he lives very much outside of the world of social media.
Yeah.
So we got to share that with him as well. So, and his reaction to that was pretty priceless.
Just the reaction to the meme thing, it kind of built And when we were officially done, he was still kind of on it a bit, and off mic said something to the effect of, I mean, look, when my wife hears about this, she's really going to get serious about how I need to do more of the cooking, so we can't let this get out, too much. But he did definitely find it amusing. And it's nice to see the sense of humor, beyond the guard dog stuff that is really the reason that they have him do those things. It's fun. It's nice. It's additional color. It's a little bit more of the humanity that people say that we don't get enough of from Josh. And to your point about, there are people who are like, you guys don't go hard enough on Wolf. And when we go hard and try to really dig for a very specific answer, you know what happens? Those like 3-word Wolf answers that nobody likes, that people say, you're not doing your jobs right. Okay, guys, pick one thing. Tell us to ask abrasive, unreasonable questions, or or let us do our jobs so that we actually get some version of answers from these guys.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I can ask a question, or I can make a challenge of Josh that he'll respect and regard. And in some cases, he will challenge those things, but it's, we've gotten to this place of mutual respect. And that is something that took work. I mean, that's not something that happened right away. I mean, that's something that happened when I was one of the first people to meet with him and sit down with him when he first got hired. So I know Jorge in the press conference had talked about, covering the team for 4 years. It's like, yeah, I mean, I've been following the team since kind of even before the inception, right? Like when all the city council stuff was going on and all that, and getting to, really know these people and work with these people. And I know that there are some people out there that think that I'm just kind of a mouthpiece for the club. I'm not. I mean, you can look at my track record. You can look at places where I've challenged Josh. You can look at places where I've criticized players. I try to be fair. That's what I try to do. I try to be fair. I try to be reasonable. I try to find the narrative and reflect it in a way that kind of best honors what's going on. And ultimately for people who are interested in the team, I want to give as kind of much of a glimpse into that as I can. Again, there are guardrails. We don't get to see everything, but again, this kind of idea that, again, I think maybe when Fagundes was here and certain people were in his circle, that maybe, yes, more information got out than it's getting out now. But I can tell you that this club is pretty controlling and pretty guarded about the information that they let out. And the reason that we're able to kind of get a lot of what we're able to get, the people that do have that trust, that do work with the club regularly, is because it's this relationship building that is going to have, kind of its peaks and valleys, but at the same time, it's something that takes work and takes diplomacy.
Yeah. And you always have to consider the source. Considering the source, this being your first attendance at a Roto press conference, you kicked things off.
Well, actually, my
and
second. I was
you-
I was there when he first
that's right.
got hired, and then schedules prevented me. But you were going to say, I'm sorry.
Well, this was your first attendance at one of his triage press conferences, because this is emergency podcast, so we talk in the terminology of emergency rooms.
Absolutely.
So you let us off by asking about the incredibly prominent name that has come from one of Tom's legendary Tommy Scoops, that Austin is finalizing a deal. Austin FV, according to the way that he wrote it. I don't know, Austin
He
FV.
corrected it right away.
Yeah, I know. That they're finalizing a deal with Osman Bukari, who currently plays for Red Star Belgrade, who has scored against Man City, who has scored against Portugal in a World Cup, who, if you look at him against his fellow Ghanaian national teammate Joseph Paintsil, yeah, I think the going opinion is that maybe he's better than Paintsil, and Paintsil's pretty great. So what did you expect to get out of asking Roto about this?
I wasn't quite sure. So, I mean, I did couch it in terms of, I know you probably can't talk about this while the deal is still going on, but wanted to get a sense of what kind of difference maker he is as a player. I wanted to see if we could maybe get some information from him that way. And then he made the annoyed face that we had talked about that says, oh yeah, this is a this is not a leaky club, but it's maybe a leaky league a little bit, and I have to deal with this and have this as maybe an impediment to me finalizing a signing. So again, yeah, Bogart's report, which initially there was a Serbian outlet, and I think Austin FV was just a keystroke error, but also there are a bunch of crazy V's and other consonants, but not X, that are in the kind of English alphabet version of Cyrillic that Serbian outlets will do. Because again, yeah, this player comes from Belgrade Red Star, and it's like Kurvana Zaveta or something like that. My Serbian is not up to snuff at all.
Yeah, neither's
But
mine,
anyway,
so you
yeah,
got no help from me.
yeah. Okay, good. So anyway, yeah. So I asked him this, and he said, "Yeah, I don't want to comment on players. There's lots of rumors that float around. I'm not on social media, but I've seen things saying that at one point we were linked to Thiago Silva, which, clearly that's not happening, nor should that happen, in my opinion. But this seems like a much more kind of credible transfer rumor, right? The other one that we're going to get to in a little bit here, to me, is either maybe this is kind of a backup if Bukari falls through, or maybe it is just an agent who's seeing that and doing transfer rumor Mad Libs and putting his client in with Austin FC and kicking that up to various journalists that he might know or she might know. We don't know. We don't presuppose to know who the agent is, but a lot of dudes in the agent world, though, we'll just say. But yeah, so Bukari basically with Belgrade Red Star, as you said, Champions League play, like 78 appearances for that team, 25 goals, 20 assists in that time. So definitely productive. A team that makes Champions League. I mean, this is basically Serbia's top team consistently, their most popular team. I think like half the country basically supports this team. So you kind of get a sense of the big fish in small ponds sort of situation that they are. And, obviously teams like that typically will get themselves to Champions League if they are from a smaller European league, and didn't advance past group stage. They were in with City and Leipzig, who I think are the two teams that advanced. And then Young Boys.
Young Boys.
From Switzerland. They're not a 90s boy band. They are a team. I think that's where Joseph Martinez came from, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's where he was playing before he got picked up by Atlanta.
And if people want to go back and watch some of those Champions League games while they're still available on Paramount Plus, the two legs against Man City were good. I think it was the November game against Young Boys, I think is one that shows him off especially well. But honestly, he shows up and shows well in all those games. And I did watch that entire group stage, not because I'm a Man City fan, but because I really wanted Red Star to beat the odds and make it out of the group with Leipzig instead of Man City.
Mhm.
And it was an entertaining set of games. And I definitely remembered him from the performance against Portugal, in which he mocked Cristiano Ronaldo's goal celebration, which
Sure
gets
did.
you on my good side real quick.
Absolutely. Like him already. Yeah. So yeah, I remember that game too. Yeah, I remember it was a super early game. We were staying in a spot in New Orleans because it was Thanksgiving weekend. And yeah, I remember that goal got scored, and then just the kind of look of horror on C. Ron's face after he had already been subbed off at that point. He was on the bench, and he just kind of looked shocked that any team would dare to score on Portugal once he had left the field, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good moment. I mean, it was, yeah, that made it. I mean, I think ultimately Portugal won that game, but it got real entertaining there at the end. It got really loose, got kind of goal heavy there in the last little bit, as I recall. So yeah, good times. I mean, and again, Ghana is one of Africa's consistently better international teams. And so you get them on that kind of stage, and you get this guy scoring against Portugal, which has kind of a notoriously stingy defense. That's a good thing, right? These are good signs. So so Roto basically gave us nothing, no indication that this player is going to come. But I think if he does, obviously he has those kind of playmaking qualities. Austin was maybe looking for Rigoni to have when he came in. Like, I remember, I've written this in my article, just kind of when Rigoni first came on and he was, zipping those kind of encouraging passes across the face of goal. We thought, okay, once they click, once they get the chemistry, we're going to have something. And that didn't ever really quite come into play. We saw it in kind of little hiccups and starts and all that. But again, to reiterate, not to the consistent level that was needed in order to, really have him solidify his place on the team. So the hope is that Bukari would come in, would be able to acclimate fairly quickly, and then obviously generate that kind of chemistry before the end of the season, gearing towards a playoff run. And all of a sudden, a team that has been kind of perceived to be overachieving based on the numbers, things that we've gone into, certainly would finally have somebody who could connect the kind of burgeoning offensive chemistry that's already happening and making that much better. And also he's incredibly fast. He's like 22 miles an hour.
Blazingly fast.
A little bit slower than Alphonso Davies, but not by much, to give you an idea.
The thing that I like most about him, and I rewatched a couple of these games, mostly in the background, but also a bit distracted from my work of the day the other day. He is really good with transitional play. Like he is very comfortable switching from speed demon goal scoring mode into I'm fullback 2 on the right side now.
Nice. Good.
Just
Yeah.
like he does positional play really well. He will slot into the system really well. That he's got that kind of little stinker thing going of trolling other players. I think he's going to fit into the vibes of the team really well as a result. This feels like a good chemistry fit. And again, I've had nothing but positive interactions with Emiliano Rigoni, person to person. Seems like the nicest guy in the world, and his teammates definitely miss him. So knowing that they are losing a buddy, that this is the personality that is coming in literally to replace him, I don't think there's going to be a chemistry problem, because these guys, as much as they love their friends, they also got to win, and they want to win, and they do not want the team's futures to be pinned on somebody underperforming, even if he is their dearest pal. So I have nothing but positive prognostication for stuff based on just some World Cup and Champions League play. That's all.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have seen, I think.
Right.
I mean, it's not many of us are following the Serbian league on
the Serbian Super League, as we know, everybody's favorite European league that isn't Serie A. But like we don't have that much info about this guy who cropped up just yesterday as a rumor, not coming from the lips of Tom Boggart, but from just elsewhere in the wilds of the internet.
And this is Ștefănescu, who's a Romanian player, I believe.
Yeah, Marius Ștefănescu, Romanian player, 25 years old. People were initially calling him a striker, and then people were saying, oh, it says he's a left wing on Wikipedia, and then Transfer Market says he's a right winger who can play left wing, who's left-footed, and who also plays midfield. So what position does he not play? Defense, it seems. But he plays most of the other positions, it seems, aside from goalkeeper.
Yeah, the thing that's tickled me most about the Mad Libs on this one is that apparently Josh Wolf is really in for him and has been tracking him, as you would expect, that he would unwind and catch some Romanian games where he could find them. Who can find them? It's unsure. Probably BN, maybe. I don't know. But I think one of the happiest days of Josh Wolf's life was when a full-time sporting director was hired, and he didn't have to be in that chief soccer officer role that he was given in that hiatus between Reina and Burrell's hires, right? So, where he could just, again, focus on coaching, leave player personnel decisions to somebody who is obviously kind of more trained in that sphere, who knows that world better. I mean, Wolf is a player who turned into an assistant coach, who turned into a coach, right? So obviously you are a little cognizant when you get in that world about player decisions and you're in on those conversations, but to not have to steer that himself, and then all of a sudden, oh, he's really locked in on this Romanian player, kind of again defies credulity, right? So again, when you look at these things, you have to step back and you have to say, does this logically make sense given what we know about the cast of characters that are being depicted in the story?
Yeah, like the case of Ștefănescu, like people immediately wanted to take it as read, and without something like, Tom Boggart worked on this and he can confirm the deal is closed or something like that. It's a rumor, and is there some credibility to it? Maybe. If he's primarily a right winger, it doesn't seem like, wage wise and reputation wise, he would be, the same kind of DP level higher kind of thing. Would they be looking at having this left-footed winger sub in at striker and maybe
Mhm.
turn him into a different kind of player in the way that Gallagher started out as a winger and now he's a fullback? This team changes people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and again, it's I mean, Burrell kind of clued us in a little bit about this too when he was talking about just kind of the process that he's going into about picking players and all that, is that you can have kind of multiple players targeted and no one can end up crossing the line, right? In some cases, you might I think he was saying something like you can target 5 different players at one position, and that I think Austin had done that actually in the offseason and weren't able to land any of them, right? So he didn't get into like super close details about that, but this idea that a lot of teams in MLS are vying for players, and obviously you're competing with teams around the world too. It is a global market, but this idea again, maybe the thing is that if Bukari can't land, maybe can Austin land Ștefănescu if Bukari is not there. But Bukari is, as we have it, kind of in Bogart reporting land versus, just this kind of random rumor that seems farther along, that seems like it's close to done. And again, we'll
Yeah.
see in a matter of weeks whether or not that bears out. But it is possible that the club has been sniffing around Ștefănescu a little bit, and that the agent is emboldened by that. I mean, again, the agents are ultimately trying to get these players signed. And
Yeah.
so any kind of buzz they perceive as being helpful, even though, as we know, a lot of these sporting directors will just kind of operate in a vacuum and do what they want to do and not necessarily track social media to see how,
Yep.
how the players. Yeah, like even I asked Stuber just kind of offhandedly, just because, it was that kind of punchy part of the day after all the questions, if players might, kind of check out Bukari's highlight reels and things like that, see what might be coming. And Brad's like, no, we'll just, once players get here, then we welcome them and all that. But before that, they don't really either, they don't bother themselves with those sorts of rumors.
Yeah, well,
either.
however, he was using Google Translate and texting Bidu before he got here, but I think that was after it was announced that he had gotten signed. So I think
Right.
I think there was a little bit of fuzzy fuzzy edges on that, where it's like not quite when they get here, but once they are actually officially signed, that's when they actually get word to the players. But in the case of
Yeah.
Ștefănescu, I'm with you. I really think that there is a good likelihood that there's as good a likelihood that this is an agent leveraging the fact that, and we're going to see more of this with Austin being such a high valued club globally and having a lot of attention on it going forward. There will be loads of rumors linked to the club based on an initial conversation that will be entirely about an agent trying to juice the level of interaction that they have had with the club in talking about their player that they would very much like to get signed. Thank you. And look, if he doesn't end up here, then he may be getting dealt elsewhere, and Austin will just be in the mouth of every agent like this who has a player that a first inquiry went in on from somebody in a scouting and recruitment department that may not have even gone anywhere. They will take that, they hope, to the bank and try to get some play out of it.
Right. So I guess the underlying message for today is agents, how can you possibly trust them?
I mean, don't is often the answer, and that's for both players and fans.
Oh, goodness. Let's see. So real quick before we sign out for the week, we do want to get to the actual kind of team emergency. As we said, 16 field players. Gallagher and Finley and Baru are all questionable for this match against San Jose. Not a place that Austin traditionally does well, but every season is its own animal, as we are reminded. And just kind of any thoughts on this particular game. Again, it's a late kick for us Central Time Zone folks, as the West Coast is selfishly adhering to their own time zone, and it's a 7:30 or 7:40 rather Pacific kick, which means 9:40 our time, which means that I'll be talking to Josh Wolf around midnight.
Well, I'd like to start with Gallagher,
Mhm.
because I saw him getting his thigh wrapped on his way out of the locker room last Saturday, and he was definitely limping, pronounced limp. I don't know that we're going to see him on Saturday.
Right.
I think questionable as far as he is concerned is nah, absolutely not. One of the things
Mm.
that they do with these weekly media availabilities is they do kind of play hide the player with us a little bit, where they time things such that if there are certain people they do not want us to see regardless, whether it's, off training on their own or whatever to the side, they make sure to not bring us back to the back at St. David's until that player is out of the way. So like when Driussi was on his way back from injury, they did not want us seeing Driussi doing literally anything so that we could interpret a limp or maybe he's treating his leg gingerly or something like that. So
We
I don't.
got brought back early one practice, and that
Yeah.
has never happened again
Uh-huh.
since. There was definitely some consternation from Coach Wolf about us being present at a time where they did not want us to be present.
So
So that is
Phil,
again guardedness. Yeah.
Phil, I have an apology to make to you,
Oh
to
yeah.
everyone
Okay.
else.
Sure.
I really should have been paying more attention when they walked us back to talk to Roto yesterday. I should have been trying to, see if Finley was out there, if Bidu was out there, if Gallagher was out there. I didn't do the job. I
Yeah,
I should have
I
had my
didn't
spy
see
camera
any
out.
of them. Josh did volunteer that Finley was quote unquote on the table, being worked on by, I think that means the massage team, or I don't think they call them the massage team, but basically whichever professionals in the high performance team are concerned with muscle recovery and things like
Mhm.
that. And in my article yesterday, Brad had talked about like kind of all the special stuff they were doing, and they have a lot of neat tricks. Your electric jellyfish pay for a lot of cool equipment that keeps players as fit as they can possibly be and being really recovery minded. I know that Finley used a term prehab with us last year, and Stuver dropped that as well. So, obviously there's conscientiousness about, hey, we're a little thinner than we already were, and we got 3 games coming up in 8 days, and obviously everybody needs to
Yeah.
stay as healthy as possible because can't really lose any more players because
Not
not really any
really.
more players to lose. So
And I'm in the world of making bets. I hate sports betting. It's one of the things about sports I loathe the most.
mm,
But I'm going to put a bet down. I'm
okay.
gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna defy my own self hatred. I'm gonna say that they are working Finley back in at some point during this 3-game run. I doubt we
Mhm.
see him in San Jose, so that they know that they have him for Portland at home. And if there's one of
Right.
these 3 games that I think, to their credit, they are not expecting to win and are hoping to just scrape a draw out of at best, it's the RSL game on the far end of things. And I think they are trying to keep folks healthy through the San Jose game, do the best that they can with the roster that they've got, and definitely go for broke against Portland at home, um, knowing that they are in for punishment when they get to Salt Lake.
Yeah, I will profess a periodic fondness for sports betting. And so I would also say that, yes, if you were finding places to wager, which you can't technically legally do in the state of Texas, you would maybe be more rosy about the prospects against Portland at home. Because obviously, if you've listened to Josh at all this year with his press conferences, the kind of home road splits that he's talking about. And yeah, that game against RSL, I think, is going to be a very, very tricky one. I would expect, kind of some similar defend like hell sort of games that we've seen in the past. But I think when you're dealing with players like Chicho Arango,
Yeah, I
defense
mean,
only goes so far. Like
batten
he
down
can
the
beat
hatch as
MLS
best you can.
defenses. Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's see. Anything else we need? Any have we sufficiently dealt with all the
Yeah,
emergencies?
I think we've covered all of the different emergencies. And
A staggering amount.
yeah, I mean the one last thing, because I brought up the locker room after the game Saturday,
Mm,
is Emmy was in there and they weren't hiding him and he didn't race out as quick as even Owen Wolf did. So I mean, judge that as you wish. If some magic Saturday night locker room conversation had been had, which would have had to happen before that point between Josh Wolf and
mhm.
Emmy Rigoni, why would he still be around? Why would he still be hanging around? That's the
Right.
big question that I had as somebody who was actually in the locker room that night, unlike Jorge. I'll
Yeah,
just
I would leave in flip-flops and shower at home. I would
Yeah.
not even deal with any of that at that point. I would probably storm off in a huff if it had gone down the way that it had been depicted. So yeah, so we have talked a lot about that though, and I'm guessing there will be maybe a couple more chapters. I am ready to sort of move on with the knowledge of how Burrell said that he handled the situation and see how the rest of the season goes, but we'll see what kind of portends the next coming days. So all right. Moises, anything else you want to say?
No, man, I'm good. I've talked enough.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's been
Ask
a lot of
anybody.
talking this week. It's oh my God, all the questions, all the talking, all the writing. But we'll obviously stay at it. It's going to be a very interesting, exciting week. Obviously, summer transfer window coming July 18th. That can't come soon enough. In the meantime, stay tuned for more Austin FC emergencies here at Emergency Podcast.
Where's Phil? He usually starts this off.
He's teaching in San Antonio today. Colby, go ahead and start us off.